The loudest thing in our house was always my father's disdain for things he couldn't quantify on a balance sheet. To Victor Kowalski, a global citizen was just a person who hadn't figured out how to dominate their local market. My passion for linguistics was treated as a shameful hobby, a flight of fancy that occupied the space where a business degree should have been. "Languages? Maya, we pay people to speak for us," he would roar, slamming his fist on the mahogany dining table. "In this world, there is only one language that matters, the language of the contract. You're wasting your brain on suffixes and syntax when you should be learning about margins and mergers." My mother, Eleanor, was no different. She viewed my fluency in Mandarin, Japanese, and Korean as a decorative trait, like knowing which fork to use at a gala, but ultimately useless. "It's a lovely party trick, dear, but let the professionals handle the deals. You just focus on looking like a Kowalski." So I stopped arguing. I stopped showing them my certificates. I built my world in secret, working as a high-level, anonymous freelance translator for international firms under the pseudonym Echo. I didn't need their approval. I had my own income and a perspective they lacked, the ability to hear what people said when they thought no one was listening. The breaking point for the Kowalski empire came in the spring of 2025. My father's heavy machinery business was on the brink of collapse after a disastrous expansion into Eastern Europe. He needed a miracle, and that miracle arrived in the form of the Saito Chen Group, a massive Asian investment consortium. "This is it, Maya," my father said, adjusting his silk tie as we stood in the lobby of his corporate headquarters. "If they sign this memorandum of understanding, we get $50 million in liquidity. I've invited them to a private dinner tonight. I want you there, not to speak, God knows we've hired the best firm for that, but to show them we are a family company. Just smile and nod." "Of course, Father," I said, my voice as neutral as a blank page. The meeting took place in the top-floor boardroom. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and desperation. On one side of the table sat my father and his lead negotiator, a man who spoke Mandarin with an accent so thick it was practically a different language. On the other side sat Mr. Saito and Mr. Chen, surrounded by a phalanx of silent assistants. The official translation began. It was a tedious dance of pleasantries and technical jargon. My father's negotiator was struggling, missing the subtle nuances of Mr. Saito's polite but firm demands. My father sat at the end of the table, dressed in a conservative black suit, my notebook open. To them, I was just the decorative daughter. But then the tone shifted. Mr. Saito leaned back and whispered something in Japanese to Mr. Chen. "The old man is desperate. He hasn't noticed the lease-back clause in Appendix C. Once he signs, he won't just be getting an investment, he'll be signing over the title deeds to all his factories as collateral for a loan he can never repay. We'll strip the assets within 6 months and leave him with the debt." Mr. Chen nodded, replying in Mandarin. "The daughter is a non-entity. Look at her. She's just a shadow. The father is blinded by his own ego. He thinks he's dominating the room, but he's just walking into a trap. We sign the handover of the operating rights first, then the asset transfer." My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of polite boredom. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I translated their words in my head over and over, confirming the betrayal. My father was about to sign away 30 years of work for a ghost of a miracle. "Victor," Mr. Saito said through the official translator, flashing a shark-like smile, "we believe in your vision. We are ready to proceed with the asset backing agreement. It's a standard formality for an investment of this scale." My father beamed. "Excellent. I knew we could find common ground. Where do I sign?" I stood up. "Father, may I see the document for a moment? I want to make sure the legal terminology is clear." "Sit
down, Maya," my father snapped, his face flushing red with embarrassment. "Don't ruin this with your linguistic curiosity. The lawyers have checked it. This is a business for men." "Actually, Victor," I said, switching my tone to one of cold, professional authority. I looked directly at Mr. Saito. "Mr. Saito was just mentioning how much he appreciates your simplicity. Isn't that right, Mr. Saito?" Mr. Saito's eyes widened for a split second before he regained his composure. "I beg your pardon?" I turned to my father. "He thinks you're a fool, Dad, and he's right. But before you sign that document, I have a proposal. If you're so sure of this deal, why not transfer the holding company's assets to me first, as a tax-saving measure for the new partnership? You've been talking about estate planning for years. Do it now as a sign of trust in the family." "What are you talking about? This is a negotiation, not a family meeting." "If you don't do it, I won't tell you what they just said about your factories, and believe me, you want to know." My father looked at me, then at the silent, watchful eyes of the investors. He saw something in my gaze he had never seen before, a power he couldn't quantify. He was backed into a corner, his ego fighting his survival instinct. "Fine," he hissed. "If it gets you to shut up and lets us move forward, I'll sign the internal transfer. It stays in the family anyway." He pulled a separate sheet of paper, a power of attorney and asset transfer he'd been sitting on for months, and signed it, sliding it over to me. "There, now you own the worthless shells of the holding company. Are you happy? Now let me finish the deal." I took the paper, folded it, and placed it in my pocket. The Kowalski empire was now legally mine. I looked at Mr. Saito. I didn't use the official translator. I spoke to him in perfect Kyoto dialect Japanese, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Mr. Saito, the leaseback clause in Appendix C is null and void. As the new legal owner of these assets, I'm terminating this negotiation, and if you attempt to use the fraudulent data you provided to the regulators, I will personally ensure that your group is barred from every European exchange." The room went deadly silent. My father's jaw dropped. Mr. Saito stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. You speak Japanese?" Saito stammered. "I speak 5 languages, Mr. Saito," I said, standing tall. "But today I'm only speaking one, the language of ownership." I'm going to pause here. If you've ever been underestimated because you didn't fit someone else's definition of power, only to realize you were the one holding the keys the whole time, I want you to comment the word fluency. Because the assets have shifted, the trap has been sprung, and Maya Kowalski is no longer just the daughter.
My dear ones, thank you for listening to this story. It makes me incredibly happy to feel that you are here with me. I try my best for you and post new videos every day, putting a piece of myself into them. If my stories resonate with you, your subscription and viewing of other videos will be the warmest support for me and inspiration to continue telling stories.
The silence in the boardroom was no longer polite. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vacuum. Mr. Saito and Mr. Chen stood like statues, their faces masks of pale fury. They had come to feast on a dying empire, only to find the decorative daughter had dismantled their trap and locked the doors. But the real explosion was sitting right next to me. My father, Victor, was staring at the signed asset transfer in my hand as if it were a live grenade. "Maya," he started, his voice a low, vibrating growl that usually preceded a corporate firing. "What did you just do? You intercepted a multi-million-dollar negotiation. You insulted our guests, and you manipulated me into signing over the holding company. Give me that paper, now." I didn't flinch. I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on Mr. Saito. Mr. Saito, your Appendix C was a masterpiece of financial fraud. If I were you, I would leave this building before my legal team, the real one, not the hacks my father hired, submits the recording of this meeting to the SEC and the Tokyo Stock Exchange. You whispered your intent to strip these assets. You confirmed the leaseback was a front for predatory liquidation. In any language, that's called a crime. Saito didn't say a word. He gave a sharp, robotic nod to Mr. Chen, and they swept out of the room, their entourage trailing behind them like a funeral procession. The heavy oak doors slammed shut, and the vacuum finally burst. "Are you insane?" Victor screamed, standing up so abruptly his chair flipped backward. "You just blew the only deal that could save us. $50 million, Maya, gone because you wanted to show off your party tricks?" "It wasn't a deal, Dad. It was an execution." I slid the asset transfer into my inner coat pocket. "They weren't investing. They were waiting for you to sign so they could evict you from your own office by Monday. Appendix C gave them the right to call in the loan the moment the ink was dry. You would have been bankrupt, and they would have owned the patents for the heavy machinery you spent your life developing." "I don't care what you think you heard," he roared, rounding the table. "I am the CEO. I am your father. You tricked me into signing that transfer under duress. It's not legal. It won't hold up in court for an hour. Now give it back, or I'll swear I'll have security escort you out of this building and out of this family." "It wasn't duress, Victor. It was a transaction. You traded the company for the truth. And now that I own the company, I'm the only one who can actually save it. Because unlike you, I know who our real enemies are." My mother, Eleanor, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was thin, sharp, and cold. "Maya, this is enough. You've had your moment of rebellion, but you are a Kowalski. We don't steal from our own. You're acting like a common thief, using these secret languages to undermine your father. Think about the scandal. Think about your reputation." "My reputation?" I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You never cared about my reputation. You cared about my utility. As long as I was the silent, pretty daughter who could be married off to a strategic partner, I was perfect. The moment I speak, I'm a thief? No, I'm an auditor, and I've been auditing this family's failures for years." I walked to the door, but before I left, I turned back. The factories stay open. The employees keep their jobs. But from this moment on, Victor, you are a consultant. I am the chairperson. If you try to fight this in court, I will release the full transcript of your private offshore accounts, the ones you've been using to hide the deficit from the board. I found them because the password was the name of your first mistress. You really should have used a more complex language for your secrets. I left the building and drove to a small, nondescript office in the old part of the city. This was the headquarters of Echo Translations. For 5 years, I had built a global network of linguists and corporate intelligence experts. We didn't just translate words, we translated intentions. "Maya, we have a problem," my lead researcher, Kenji, said as I walked in. He was looking at a series of encrypted messages on his screen. "Saito Chen isn't just letting this go. They've figured out who you are. They've connected the decorative daughter to Echo. They're planning to leak your client list." My heart skipped a beat. The core of my business was anonymity. I had translated for heads of state, for whistleblowers, for CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. If the world found out that Echo was actually Maya Kowalski, every client I ever had would fear that their secrets were compromised. I whispered, "They want to destroy my credibility so I can't protect the Kowalski assets."
It's worse, Kenji said. They've sent a tip to the biggest business daily. The headline is already drafted. The Echo of Betrayal, how an anonymous translator manipulated her way into an empire. They're going to frame your intervention in the boardroom as a planned hostile takeover by a corporate spy who used her position to steal from her own father. I sat down, the weight of the war finally hitting me. I wasn't just fighting for a company anymore. I was fighting for my life's work. If I lost my reputation as a translator, I lost everything. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. The Saito Chen Group doesn't just want the factories, Maya. They want the records of the 2023 Geneva Summit. You were the lead translator for the private sessions. They know you have the transcripts of the energy corridor deals. Give them the transcripts, and the echo leak goes away. You keep the company, your father keeps his pride. Everyone wins. I stared at the screen. The Geneva Summit, the deals that reshaped the energy map of Europe. If those transcripts went public or fell into the hands of a predatory group like Saito Chen, it would cause a geopolitical earthquake. This wasn't about Appendix C anymore. This was a chess game with the world as the board. I looked at Kenji. They think they can use my silence against me. They think because my father silenced me for 20 years, I'll be afraid of the noise. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what I always do when someone thinks they have the standard version of the story, I said, my voice hardening. I'm going to provide the correct translation. I called my father. He answered on the first ring, his voice sounding broken and desperate. Maya, the press is calling. They're asking about Echo. They're asking if you've been spying on me for years. Is it true? Are you a spy, Maya? I'm not a spy, Dad. I'm a witness, and I need you to do exactly what I say if you want to save the family name, because Saito Chen just made the biggest mistake you can make in linguistics. What's that? They assumed I only have one copy of the truth. I'm going to pause here. If you've ever had your career used as a weapon against your character, only to realize your integrity is the only thing that can't be translated into a lie, I want you to comment the word linguist, because the echo is about to become a roar. The Geneva files are on the line, and the Kowalski daughter is about to teach the world the real meaning of terms and conditions.
The weight of a secret is determined not by its content, but by the number of people who want to buy it. I sat in the dim light of my office, watching the countdown on the Saito Chen encrypted portal. They had given me 12 hours to hand over the Geneva Summit transcripts. If I refused, Echo would be unmasked as a traitorous daughter and a corporate spy in the morning editions of every major financial paper. My reputation, the only thing I had built with my own hands, was being used as the scaffold for my own execution. Maya, the legal team says we can't stop the publication, Kenji whispered, leaning over my shoulder. The press has the evidence, the IP logs connecting your home address to the Echo server. Even if it was hacked, the association is enough to kill your career. No head of state will ever let you into a closed session again. Then I won't wait for them to unmask me, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. We're going to host an event tonight in the main ballroom of the Kowalski Plaza, and we're going to invite the very people Saito Chen thinks I've betrayed. Are you insane? You're going to stand in front of the world's most powerful clients and admit you've been leading a double life? I'm going to admit I've been a witness, and I'm going to show them that while I kept their secrets, Saito Chen was busy stealing them. I spent the next 4 hours sending out a single encrypted invitation to a list of 40 individuals. These weren't just clients, they were the architects of modern energy policy, the CEOs of global tech firms, and a handful of high-ranking diplomats. The subject line was simple: the correct translation of the Saito Chen ultimatum. By 9 p.m., the ballroom was a sea of expensive suits and strained faces. The air was thick with suspicion. My father, Victor, stood near the bar, looking like a man who had been invited to his own funeral. He was surrounded by a few remaining board members, whispering about Maya's madness. I walked onto the small stage. No podium, no notes, just me and a massive projection screen behind me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice echoing through the silent room. "For the last 5 years, many of you have known me as Echo. You trusted me with your most sensitive negotiations because I understood that a language is more than words. It is an intent. Today, the Saito Chen Group has attempted to blackmail me. They want the Geneva Summit transcripts. If I refused, Echo would be unmasked as a traitorous daughter and a corporate spy in the morning editions of every major financial paper." Murmurs of shock rippled through the room. I saw a French diplomat lean forward, his eyes narrowing. But here is the translation they didn't expect. I hit a key on my remote. "While I was translating your meetings, I wasn't just listening to you. I was listening to the system," I said. "Saito Chen has been using a proprietary AI translation software they've sold to many of your firms as a secure alternative. What they didn't tell you is that this software contains a linguistic backdoor. It records the frequency of specific keywords, merger, bankruptcy, sanctions, and sends a real-time summary to their trading floor in Hong Kong. They haven't been investing in your companies. They've been front-running your decisions based on your own words." The room erupted. I saw a German energy mogul stand up, his face flushed with rage. "You have proof of this? This is a violation of international trade law." "The proof is on that screen," I said. "I found the code because it was written in a dialect of Mandarin used only in a specific region of the Fujian province, the same region where Mr. Saito's lead programmer was born. They thought no one would notice a translation error in the metadata, but I am a linguist. I notice everything." I looked at my father. He was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. He finally saw the scale of the game I was playing. It wasn't about his factories. It was about the integrity of the global market. "Saito Chen wanted to destroy me tonight to protect this secret. They thought I would choose my father's company over my professional code. They were wrong. I am transferring the Kowalski assets into a public trust managed by an independent board. I am no longer the owner, and I'm no longer Echo. I am just a witness who is telling the truth." Suddenly, the doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. Mr. Saito walked in, flanked by 2 lawyers. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. "This is a fabrication," Saito shouted, pointing a finger at me. "She is a disgruntled daughter trying to mask her own theft of her father's assets. Victor, tell them she lied to you. Tell them she's a fraud." The room turned to my father. This was the moment. Victor could choose to side with the standard he had always lived by, the ego, the pride, the desire to get his company back. Or he could choose the daughter he had spent 20 years ignoring. Victor walked slowly toward the stage. He looked at Saito, then at me. He saw the decorative daughter standing there, holding the weight of dozens international scandals without breaking. "My daughter," Victor began, his voice surprisingly clear, "is many things. She is stubborn, she is secretive, and she has a talent for making me feel like a complete idiot." He paused, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "But she is not a liar. I signed those assets over to her because I was a fool who couldn't see the trap, but she saw it. She heard the words I couldn't understand. If Maya says you're a thief, Saito, then I'd suggest you start looking for a very expensive lawyer, because in this family we might have trouble with translation, but we understand the word consequences." Saito's face went from pale to gray.
The security team I had prearranged, Interpol agents in plain clothes, moved in. They didn't need to say a word. The backdoor evidence on the screen was enough for a dozen warrants. As Saito was let out, the room began to breathe again, but I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I felt a profound sense of closure. I walked down from the stage. My father was waiting for me. He reached out and awkwardly placed a hand on my shoulder. "So, the worthless shells of the holding company, you really turned them into a weapon, didn't you?" "I didn't turn them into anything, Dad. I just revealed what they actually were. A house of cards built on a foundation of silence." "What happens now, Maya? You've given the company away. You've outed yourself as Echo. You've basically fired yourself from every job you ever had." "No," I said, looking around at the clients who were already forming a line to speak to me, not with suspicion, but with a new, profound respect. "I just cleared the air. Now, for the first time, we can actually start a real conversation." I'm going to pause here. If you've ever had to sacrifice your safety to protect your truth, I want you to comment the word witness, because the Saito-Chen empire is in ruins, the Kowalski name is finally clean, and Maya is no longer translating for the world, she's leading it.
My dear ones, thank you for listening to this story. It makes me incredibly happy to feel that you are here with me. I try my best for you and post new videos every day, putting a piece of myself into them. If my stories resonate with you, your subscription and viewing of other videos will be the warmest support for me and inspiration to continue telling stories.
The problem with turning off a light is that you finally see what was hiding in the corners, and sometimes those things have teeth. Within 48 hours of the evening of open translation, the Saito-Chen Group was in freefall. Their stocks were suspended, and international regulators were swarming their offices in Hong Kong and Zurich. I should have felt safe. I should have felt like the audit was complete. But as I sat in my new office at MK Holdings, the trust I had established to protect my father's legacy, the air felt thin. "Maya, we have a visitor," Kenji said, his voice dropping to a cautious whisper. He didn't make an appointment. He didn't even use the front door. He's in the secure lounge. I walked into the lounge to find a man I recognized instantly, though I had only ever seen the back of his head in private summits. It was Minister Julien Vasseur, a key architect of the European Energy Corridor and one of my most high-profile clients from the Geneva days. "Minister," I said, keeping my distance, "I didn't expect to see you outside of a secure facility." "You made a mistake, Maya," Vasseur said, not looking up from his coffee. "You unmasked yourself. You thought that by exposing Saito-Chen, you would be seen as a hero, but in our world, a hero is just a witness who hasn't been silenced yet. You know the details of the North-South bypass negotiations. You know which ministers took the side deals, and now everyone knows that you know." "I've never broken my code of silence regarding my clients, Minister. My fight was with Saito-Chen's fraud, not with the contents of the Geneva transcripts." "It doesn't matter." Vasseur stood up, his face a mask of cold, bureaucratic steel. "The optics have shifted. If you can betray one partner like Saito, you can betray us. The cabinet has decided that you are a national security risk. There's an investigation being opened into Echo for the illegal possession of classified state secrets. They're going to frame it as state treason, Maya. They'll say you stole the transcripts to sell them to the highest bidder before your change of heart." "You're going to frame me for treason to protect your own side deals?" I asked, a cold chill running down my spine. "I'm going to protect the stability of the region," Vasseur replied. "You have 6 hours to hand over the original encrypted drives from Geneva, all of them. If you do, you'll be allowed to retire to a quiet life. If you don't, the police will be here by midnight with a warrant that will end your life as a free woman." He left without another word. I stood in the center of the room, the silence echoing.
My father, Victor, stepped out from the adjoining office. He had heard everything. For the first time, he didn't look like the roaring lion of the industry. He looked like a father who realized his daughter was standing front of a firing squad. "They're coming for you, aren't they?" he asked, his voice rough. "They're coming for the truth, Dad. I'm just the one holding it." "Not alone, you're not," Victor said, straightening his suit. "You've spent years being my translator in a world I didn't understand. Now it's time for me to be your fixer in the world I do understand. Vasseur thinks he can use the law. He's forgotten that the law is just a series of negotiations, and I've been negotiating with sharks like him before you were born." "Dad, this is dangerous. They're talking about treason." "Let them talk," Victor growled. "In business, when someone threatens to sue you for everything you have, it means they have absolutely nothing they can actually prove. If they had the evidence, they wouldn't be giving you 6 hours. They'd be giving you handcuffs." Victor spent the next 3 hours on the phone. I watched him work, the way his voice shifted, the way he leveraged old favors, the way he hinted at contributions and deaths. He wasn't using logic, he was using the raw language of power. "Maya," he called out, slamming the phone down, "we're not going to hand over the drives. We're going to do something better. We're going to leak the fact that we've already handed them over to a third-party, neutral arbitrator." "Who? I don't have an arbitrator." "You do now," Victor replied. "The Vatican's private archives. I have a contact there from the 90s. They don't care about European energy politics. They'd only care about historical records. If the world thinks the Geneva files are in the hands of the Holy See, Vasseur can't touch you without causing a diplomatic incident that would make the Saito Chen scandal look like a playground fight." "It's a bluff, Dad. I don't have a way to get the drives to Rome in 3 hours." "It's not a bluff if we make it a reality," Victor said. "But we need a distraction. We need to make Vasseur believe the handoff is happening here, in the city. I'll be the decoy. I'll take a secure briefcase to the airport. You take the data and disappear." "No," I said, looking at the echo server on my desk. "I'm tired of disappearing. I've been a shadow for 5 years. If I run now, I'll be a shadow for the rest of my life." I sat down at the terminal. I didn't send the data to Rome. I didn't send it to Vasseur. I started a live stream, but this one was different. It wasn't to the public. It was a private, multi-way video call to every minister involved in the Geneva summit. "Gentlemen," I said, as the faces of some of the most powerful men in Europe appeared on my screen, "Minister Vasseur is currently at my door with a threat of treason. He wants the Geneva transcripts to hide the fact that he promised the Eastern Bloc a 15% discount in exchange for a private pipeline through his family's estate. But here is the translation you all need. If I go down, the encryption key to the entire Geneva database is set to auto-release to the Global Transparency Project at midnight." Vasseur, who was watching from his car outside, burst back into the room, his face purple with rage. "You wouldn't dare! You'd destroy the entire energy market." "The market is already broken, Julian," I said, looking him in the eye through the camera. "I'm just giving it a chance to be honest, unless you all agree to a global audit of the energy corridor, overseen by an independent body. No treason charges, no secret deals, just the truth, translated for everyone to see." The silence on the video call was deafening. One by one, the other ministers, men who had their own secrets but realized Vasseur had gone too far, started to nod. "Vasseur is acting on his own," a voice from the screen said. "The cabinet does not support these charges. Maya, we accept the audit. Drop the midnight release." Vasseur collapsed into a chair, his career ending in a single digital heartbeat. Victor walked over to me and leaned against the desk. "You know, Maya, for someone who hates worthless words, you certainly know how to make them count." "It's not the words, Dad," I said, closing the laptop. "It's knowing when to stop translating and start speaking." I'm going to pause here. If you've ever realized that your greatest liability is actually the only thing that makes you untouchable, I want you to comment the word untouchable, because the Geneva files are safe, the ministers are in check, and the Kowalski daughter has just rewritten the grammar of power.
The burden of being an independent arbiter is that you no longer have the luxury of taking sides, even when one of those sides is your own blood. After the Vasseur scandal, I was appointed as the lead auditor for the merger between Aero Global and Skyline Tech. It was supposed to be the crowning achievement of modern aviation, a fleet of self-correcting, AI-piloted commercial jets. My job was simple: ensure the linguistic integration of the two companies' flight operating systems was seamless. But as I delved into the subroutines of the AeroCore 9 engine, I realized that seamless was a polite word for dangerously misinterpreted. "Maya, you've been staring at that block of C++ for 6 hours, Kenji said, dropping a cup of black coffee on my desk. "It's flight code, not a Mandarin poem. What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for the translation between the sensor input and the mechanical response, Kenji," I whispered, pointing to a line of nested loops. "Look at this. The Aero Global system uses metric units for pressure, but the Skyline subprocessor interprets the value X variable in imperial units. It's a classic conversion error buried under 12 layers of encryption." "So, they'll fix it in the next patch." "No! In high-altitude turbulence, this minor discrepancy causes the stabilizer to overcorrect by exactly 12%. At supersonic speeds, that doesn't just cause a bump, it causes a structural failure. This code isn't a bridge between companies, it's a death warrant for every passenger on those planes." I stood up, my heart pounding. This wasn't corporate greed anymore. It was engineering negligence masked by linguistic ego. The next morning, I called a meeting with the CEO of Aero Global, a man named Sterling Vance. He was a titan of industry, the kind of man who viewed safety regulations as suggestions and auditors as bureaucratic speed bumps. "Miss Kowalski," Vance said, leaning back in his leather chair, a smirk playing on his lips, "I heard you found a typo in our code. My engineers tell me it's a negligible rounding error. We're set for the public launch on Friday. The shares are already up 14%. I suggest you sign the certification and let us handle the technicalities." "It's not a rounding error, Mr. Vance. It's a systemic miscommunication. If those planes fly, people will die. I cannot and will not certify this merger until the core logic is rewritten." Vance's smile vanished. "Do you have any idea how much money is at stake? $10 billion in pre-orders. If we delay, the company collapses. And if the company collapses, so do its creditors, including, if I recall correctly, Kowalski Heavy Machinery." I froze. What does my father's business have to do with Aero Global? Vance slid a folder across the table. Inside was a series of loan agreements. During the weeks I was busy fighting Saito Chen, my father had taken out a massive short-term bridge loan to keep his factories running. The lender? A subsidiary of Aero Global. "Your father is a gambling man, Maya. He bet that you'd certify the merger and the market would stay stable. If you flag this error, his loans will be called in immediately. He'll lose everything, the factories, the trust you built, even the family home. Certify the code and those debts are wiped clean. We'll even give your father a seat on the new board." I walked out of the office, the air feeling like lead in my lungs. I went straight to my father's office. I found him staring at a model of an old crane, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Did you do it, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Did you sell my integrity to save your machines?" Victor didn't look up. "I didn't have a choice, Maya. After the scandal, no bank would touch me.
Vance was the only one offering a hand. I thought with you in charge of the audit it would be a formality. It's just code, isn't it? Just some words in a machine? It's not just words, Dad. It's lives. If I sign that paper, I am responsible for every person who steps on those planes. And if I don't, I destroy you. I'm already destroyed, Maya, Victor said, finally looking at me. His eyes were tired, the fire gone. I've spent my life building things of steel, and it turns out they were all held together by your worthless languages. If you have to burn the house down to keep your soul, then burn it. I've lived long enough to know that a man without a home is better than a man without a daughter he can respect. I looked at him, and for the first time, the standard version of my father, the roaring, ego-driven CEO, was replaced by the real one, a man who was finally learning the cost of silence. But I wasn't ready to burn the house down yet. I am a linguist, and in linguistics, if you can't translate a concept, you change the context. I went back to the office and stayed up for 48 hours. I didn't try to fix the code myself. Instead, I used my Echo network to reach out to the chief engineers of both companies, the ones who had been silenced by Vance's management. We need a universal translator for the machine, I told them in a secure encrypted chat. Not a patch, a whole new interface layer that force syncs all units to a single standard before the processor even sees the data. The Vance will never approve the time for that. He won't because we're going to leak the metric imperial error to the Aviation Safety Board in 6 hours, unless the fix is already mysteriously present in the pre-launch update. The move was a linguistic ambush. I didn't certify the merger. Instead, I submitted a conditional certification that made the merger legal only if a specific data integrity layer, the one my engineers had secretly built, was implemented. Vance was trapped. If he fought it, he'd have to explain why he was against a safety layer. If he accepted it, he'd have to admit that his original code was flawed. He chose the latter. The merger went through, the planes were safe, and my father's debt was restructured under the new, safer entity. But as the celebrations began, I received a package at my home. It was an old-fashioned tape recorder with a single note. You think you've balanced the ledger, but some things can't be translated back into safe. Listen to the 2018 archives, the part you were told to delete. I pressed play. I heard my own voice, 7 years younger, translating for my father and a man I didn't recognize. The shipment of steel for the bridge project, the man said. It's substandard, Victor. It won't hold the weight. And then my father's voice. The daughter won't translate that part. She knows what happens if she does. Maya, tell the inspectors the steel is grade A. And then my own voice, hesitant but clear. The steel, it meets all grade A specifications. I felt the world tilt. I hadn't just been a witness to my father's crimes. I had been an accomplice. Long before I became Echo, I had used my gift to protect his lies. The audit wasn't just about Aero Global. It was about me. I'm going to pause here. If you've ever realized that your clean hands were once stained by the very things you now fight against, I want you to comment the word complicit, because the 2018 bridge project is still standing, the steel is failing, and the goddess of truth is about to find out that her own past is the one thing she can't translate away.
My dear ones, thank you for listening to this story. It makes me incredibly happy to feel that you are here with me. I try my best for you and post new videos every day, putting a piece of myself into them. If my stories resonate with you, your subscription and viewing of other videos will be the warmest support for me and inspiration to continue telling stories.
The most dangerous lies are the ones that sound exactly like your own voice.
I sat in the darkness of my apartment, the 2018 tape recorder sitting on the table like a poisonous insect. I played the segment again. The steel, it meets all grade A specifications. My voice was younger, higher, but the cadence, the way I paused before the word specifications, was unmistakably mine. I looked at the blueprints for the Kowalski Vein Memorial Bridge, a massive suspension project completed 5 years ago. It was the pride of the city, a symbol of the steel age my father claimed to have pioneered. If that tape was real, I hadn't just translated a lie. I had signed a death warrant for the 30,000 people who drove across that bridge every day. "Maya, you've been under for 10 hours, Kenji's voice crackled through my intercom. He sounded worried. "I've been running the metadata on the digital copy of that tape you sent me. Something is wrong." I let him in. He looked like he hadn't slept. He pulled up a sound wave analysis on his laptop. "Listen to the background noise, Maya." He pointed to a series of jagged spikes on the screen. "In the 2018 recording, there's a low-frequency hum. It's consistent with a specific type of industrial air conditioner used in the Aero Global headquarters. But in 2018, that building didn't exist. It was still a construction site." "So the tape is a fake?" I asked. Hope flared in my chest. "It's not a fake in the traditional sense," Kenji said, his fingers flying across the keys. "It's a deep linguistic composite. Someone took your voice from hundreds of different recordings, Geneva, the boardrooms, your private calls, and used an AI to rebuild your speech patterns. But they didn't just stitch words together, they stitched the intent. This is the work of the editor." "Who is the editor?" I asked. "A ghost. A specialist in reputation management for the 1%. They don't kill people, Maya. They kill their history. If people believe you were complicit in 2018, your Echo brand is dead. You become a criminal. And while you're fighting for your life in court, the Aero Global Skyline merger can be stripped of the safety protocols you forced them on." "They're trying to discredit the auditor to save the machine," I whispered. "But the bridge, Kenji, regardless of the tape, is the bridge safe?" "I don't know, but I found a discrepancy in the original procurement logs. The steel wasn't grade A. It was scrap redirect from a defunct shipyard. And the person who signed off on the shipment wasn't your father. It was a shell company called Phoneme Holdings." Phoneme, a linguistic term. The editor was mocking me. I realized then that I couldn't just fight this in a lab. I needed to see the steel for myself. I called my father. He sounded panicked, his breathing heavy. "Maya, they're here. The investigators. They have the tape. They say if I don't testify that you were the one who suggested the bribe, they'll freeze the trust. They'll take everything." "Don't say a word, Dad. Not one word. I'm going to the bridge." I drove to the Kowalski Vein Memorial Bridge at 3 a.m. It was a titan of light and steel, stretching across the bay. I parked in the service lane and climbed down to the maintenance gantry. I'm not an engineer, but I know how to read the language of wear and tear. I used a high-powered ultrasonic sensor Kenji had given me. As I moved the sensor across the primary load-bearing pylon, the readout turned a violent shade of purple. Microfractures, structural fatigue, rapid oxidation. The bridge wasn't just old, it was rotting from the inside. The scrap redirect steel was failing. Suddenly, the lights on the gantry flickered and died. It's beautiful, isn't it? The way a lie can hold up 30,000 tons of reality for 5 years. I spun around. A man was standing on the gantry, shrouded in the fog. He held a tablet, the screen glowing with the same interface I used for my translations. He was young, well-dressed, and utterly calm. "The editor," I said.
I prefer the narrative architect, he replied, his voice smooth and devoid of any regional accent, a perfect linguistic neutral. Maya, you've been a very troublesome witness. You think the truth is a fixed point, but the truth is just a translation of power. Today, the world believes you are a fraud. Tomorrow, the bridge will have a minor incident, enough to cause a panic but not a collapse. And guess whose name will be on the safety certification found in the archives? I never signed a safety cert for this bridge, I snapped. The AI says you did, he smiled, tapping his tablet. And in the age of the standard, the data is more real than the person. Your father is already signing the confession. He thinks it's the only way to save you. He's always been so easy to manipulate. He speaks the language of guilt fluently. Why go to this much trouble for a bridge? I asked, slowly backing towards the service ladder. It's not about the bridge, Maya. It's about the narrative. If an auditor like you can be corrected, then no one will ever dare to look at the code again. We are building a world of seamless integration, where no one asks questions. You are the only noise left in the system, and noise must be filtered. He raised his tablet, and I heard the sound of a drone, a small, silent quadcopter equipped with high tensile wire. It wasn't meant to kill me. It was meant to trip me, to make me fall into the bay. A tragic accident for a disgraced CEO. But the editor made one mistake. He assumed I was just a linguist. He forgot that I was a Kowalski. I had spent my childhood on construction sites, playing in the skeletons of cranes. I didn't climb the ladder. I jumped. Not into the water, but onto the heavy-duty counterweight cable of the maintenance lift. I swung out over the abyss, my heart in my throat, and grabbed the manual release lever. The gantry groaned and tilted. The editor stumbled, his tablet skittering across the metal and falling into the dark. The thing about translations, I shouted as I scrambled back onto the solid concrete of the pylon, is that they always lose something in the process. You lost the context, architect. You forgot that I know this bridge better than you know your code. I didn't run. I pulled out my phone and started a recording, but I didn't record him. I recorded the ultrasonic sensor's readout, the violent purple spikes of the failing steel. I'm not fighting your tape with my voice, I said. I'm fighting your narrative with physics. You can edit my past, but you can't edit the oxidation of scrap steel. The bridge is the evidence, and if you kill me, the root audit protocol I set up will release this scan to every insurance company in the world. Your Aero Global investors won't care about my reputation when they realize they're liable for a billion-dollar disaster. The editor froze. For the first time, his perfect linguistic mask slipped. He looked at the failing pylon, then at me. You'd destroy your father's legacy just to win an argument? He asked. I'm not winning an argument, I said. I'm correcting a translation. My father's legacy isn't the steel, it's me.
The hardest thing to translate is the necessity of pain. At 6 a.m., as the first light of dawn hit the bay, I did what the editor thought was impossible. I didn't wait for a court order. I didn't wait for a board meeting. I used my emergency override as the chairperson of MK Holdings, the entity that still technically owned the maintenance contracts for the bridge, and I shut it down. I triggered the red code alarm. Massive steel barriers slammed down at both ends of the Kowalski Vane Memorial Bridge. Automated sirens wailed, echoing across the water. Within minutes, the city was in a stranglehold. Thousands of cars were backed up for miles. The pulse of the region's economy flatlined. Maya, what have you done? My father's voice came through my phone, sounding like he was speaking from the bottom of a well.
The mayor is calling. The governor is calling. They're saying you've committed an act of domestic terrorism. The investigators are calling it a distraction tactic to hide your 2018 crimes. Let them call it whatever they want, Dad, I said, standing at the base of the vibrating pylon. I have the ultrasonic data. The bridge is at a 92% fatigue threshold. If a heavy freight truck hits the mid-span resonance today, the whole thing goes into the bay. I'm not letting people die to protect a narrative. They're coming to arrest you, Maya. Not for the tape, for the shutdown. I know, but as long as the barriers are down, no one dies. That's the only translation that matters right now. Within the hour, the editor fought back. He didn't use drones this time. He used the media. Every news outlet received a leaked document, another high-level forgery, stating that the ultrasonic sensors had been tampered with by me to create a false alarm. They claimed I was holding the city hostage to force the government to drop the treason charges from the Geneva case. I was the most hated woman in the country, the echo who had turned into a siren. Kenji, how are we doing on the editor's location? I asked, my voice cracking from exhaustion. I was hunkered down in the bridge's control room, the door barricaded. Kenji, I've traced the tablet's signal from the gantry. He's not in an office. He's moving. He's using a high-altitude signal relay. Maya, he's in the government communications center. He isn't just a freelancer, he's a state asset. He's the one who cleans the records for the Ministry of Infrastructure. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The ministry knew about the scrap steel in 2018. They had approved it to save billions in the state budget, and they had used the editor to frame me as a failsafe. If the bridge ever failed, it would be the corrupt daughter's fault, not a systemic failure of the government. They're going to let the bridge stay closed, Maya. If it stays closed, they have to explain why. They'd rather let it collapse and blame me than admit they built it out of junk. The police are at the North Barrier, Maya. They have a direct order from the minister to manually override your shutdown. They're going to open the bridge in 10 minutes. I looked at the monitors. I saw the police cruisers, the SWAT teams, and the angry commuters screaming at the barriers. I saw the editor in a black sedan, parked just behind the police line, watching. He was waiting for the accident to happen. I did the only thing a linguist can do when the dialogue reaches a dead end. I changed the language of the confrontation. I patched my audio feed into the bridge's public address system, the massive speakers designed for weather alerts. People of the city, my voice boomed, distorted by the wind and the salt air. My name is Maya Kowalski. You have been told I'm a traitor. You have been told this is a hoax. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to look at the standard. I hit a button on my laptop, broadcasting the live ultrasonic feed directly to the massive digital billboards that usually showed car advertisements along the highway. The purple lines you see are not a simulation. They are the heartbeat of this bridge, and it is stopping. If the police open these gates, they are inviting you to your funeral. Minister Vasseur and the editor know the steel is scrap. They've spent 5 years editing the truth, but they can't edit the sound of snapping metal. I turned to the editor's car on the monitor. I know you're listening. You think you've won because you have the official version, but I have the original version, and I'm not the only one. I signaled my father. On the other side of the city, Victor Kowalski walked out on the steps of the Justice Department. He wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a dozen retired foremen and steelworkers from the 2018 project, men who had been paid to be silent, but who still had their original work logs hidden in their basements. My daughter didn't bribe us, my father shouted into a forest of microphones. I did. I was the one who took the ministry's money to use the scrap steel. I recorded the meetings because I'm a paranoid old man who didn't trust the politicians. My daughter is the only person who tried to stop it. Victor held up a rusted piece of a steel bolt, a sample he had kept as insurance. The editor can fake a tape, but he can't fake a 5-year metallurgical analysis. Arrest me, but keep that bridge closed." The momentum shifted. The police at the barrier hesitated. They looked at the billboards, then at the frantic orders coming through their radios. They saw the editor's car suddenly reverse and try to speed away. "Don't let him leave!" I screamed into the PA system. The commuters, the very people who had been cursing my name minutes ago, realized the truth. In a moment of collective translation, they saw the car as the enemy. They blocked the road with their own vehicles, creating a human barrier that the editor couldn't bypass. I watched on the screen as the narrative architect was dragged from his car, not by the police, but by the citizens he had tried to manipulate. I collapsed into the chair, the adrenaline leaving me in a cold wave. The bridge remained silent. The father had found his voice, and the audit is moving toward its final, absolute resolution.
The silence that follows a revolution is never peaceful. It is the silence of an empty house where you finally have to live with yourself. After the Great Standoff, the city was transformed. The Kowalski Vein Bridge was dismantled piece by piece, revealed to be a hollow monument to corruption. My father, Victor, was sentenced to 6 years in a minimum security facility. He went willingly, carrying a stack of books on ancient history, finally trading the language of steel for the language of the past. I was left with nothing. MK Holdings was liquidated to pay for the bridge's reconstruction and the lawsuits of 1,000 defrauded contractors. My name, once a whisper of prestige in Geneva and Davos, was now a case study in chaotic transparency. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. No servers, no encrypted lines, no mahogany desks. Just a stack of boxes from my mother's estate that the liquidators had deemed of no commercial value. "Maya, you need to see this," Kenji said, visiting me for the first time in weeks. He looked different. He had taken a job as a cybersecurity consultant for a nonprofit. He held a small, weathered leather journal I had found in the bottom of a box labeled Eleanor's Keepsakes. "I ran the ink dating on the last pages," Kenji whispered. "Your mother didn't just collect art, Maya. She was a cryptographer for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs before she met your father, and she was the one who registered the domain name for Echo 10 years before you ever used it." My heart stopped. I opened the journal. The handwriting was elegant, a script I knew from birthday cards and grocery lists, but the content was a mathematical proof for a linguistic encryption algorithm, the very one I had invented for Echo. "To my daughter," the first entry began, dated the day I was born. "They will try to tell you that your voice is a tool for their gain. They will try to make you a mirror for their lies. But I am leaving you a language they cannot speak. I am starting a whisper that will one day become an echo. Use it when the silence becomes too loud." Eleanor hadn't been the passive, decorative wife. She had been the architect of my survival. She knew Victor's world was built on sand, and she had spent her life secretly building a fortress of information for me to inherit. She knew about the 2018 bridge, I realized, flipping through the pages. She had the original metallurgical reports. She was the one who leaked the scrap redirect logs to your father's paranoid files, so I would find them later. She was auditing the family before I even knew what an audit was. The final entry was written just weeks before her death. "The truth is not a destination, Maya. It is a process of translation. You will lose everything to find it, but once you have it, you will never be a shadow again. The echo is not yours to keep. It belongs to the world." Suddenly, my phone, the simple, unencrypted one I had bought to start over, buzzed. It was a message from an anonymous source, but the headers were familiar. It was the same digital signature used by the Vatican archives, the neutral arbitrator my father had bluffed about.
The Geneva files are not in Rome, Maya. They were never there. They are in the cloud of witnesses. Your mother established a decentralized network of translators across 60 countries. They are waiting for the final key. The standard is ready to be replaced by the sovereign, a system where every citizen can translate the laws of their own government in real time. I looked at Kenji. She didn't just give me a business, she gave me a movement. The Echo wasn't just a pseudonym, it's a protocol for global transparency. If you activate that key, Maya, Kenji warned, you aren't just an auditor anymore. You're the administrator of a new world order. The politicians, the Vanes, the editors of the world, they will never stop hunting you. You'll never have a normal life. You'll be the woman who ended the age of secrets. I walked to the window. Below me, the city was moving. People were going to work, crossing new temporary bridges, speaking a dozen different languages, most of them built on the assumptions and lies of the people in power. I looked at my hands. They were no longer stained by the 2018 steel. They were steady. I've spent my whole life translating for other people. I've been the voice of billionaires, ministers, and my father. I've lived in the gap between what is said and what is meant. I picked up the journal. I saw the final cipher, the one my mother had left for me. It wasn't a word. It was a sound, a phonetic representation of a heartbeat. It's time to stop the echo and start the conversation. I sat down at Kenji's laptop. I didn't hide. I didn't use a pseudonym. I typed in the final key, Eleanor Vow. With a single click, the sovereign protocol went live. Across the globe, millions of documents, government contracts, energy deals, environmental reports were suddenly translated into every local dialect, accompanied by a truth context layer that highlighted every hidden clause and every predatory Appendix C. The language of power was stripped of its armor. The standard was dead. The sovereign was now in the hands of everyone who could read the laws of their own government. I stood up and put on my coat. "Where are you going?" Kenji asked, stunned by the scale of what we had just unleashed. "I'm going to the prison. I have to tell my father that his daughter finally figured out what grade A steel actually looks like. It's not a metal. It's a person who doesn't need a filter to stand in the light." As I walked out of the bakery and into the street, no one recognized me. I wasn't the goddess of truth or the treasonous daughter. I was just Maya, a woman who spoke many languages, but finally only one truth. The world was loud, messy, and complicated. There were still lies and there were still shadows, but for the first time they were being translated. And for the first time, the echo was silent, because the real voices were finally being heard.
My dear ones, thank you for listening to this story. It makes me incredibly happy to feel that you are here with me. I try my best for you and post new videos every day, putting a piece of myself into them. If my stories resonate with you, your subscription and viewing of other videos will be the warmest support for me and inspiration to continue telling stories.